1. Definitions. In this Title 1, the term insular area has the meaning given such term in Section 1404 of the National Agricultural Research, Extension, and Teaching Policy Act of 1977, 7 U.S.C. 3103. 2. The term Secretary means the Secretary of Agriculture. Subtitle B. Forestry Sec. 11001. National Forest System Restoration and Fuels Reduction Projects. A. Appropriations. In addition to amounts otherwise available, they are appropriated to the Secretary for fiscal year 2022, out of any money in the Treasury not otherwise appropriated, to remain available until September 30, 2031. 1. $10 billion for hazardous fuels reduction projects within the wildland-urban interface. 2. $4 billion for, on a determination by the Secretary that hazardous fuels within the wildland-urban interface have been effectively treated to prevent the spread of wildfire to at-risk communities, hazardous fuels reduction projects outside the wildland-urban interface that are a. non-commercial in nature, except on a determination by the Secretary, in accordance with the best available science. That the harvest of merchantable materials is ecologically necessary for restoration and to enhance ecological integrity, subject to the requirement that the sale of merchantable materials shall be limited to small diameter trees or biomass that are a byproduct of projects under this paragraph. B. Collaboratively developed. And C. Carried out in a manner that I. enhances the ecological integrity and achieves the restoration of a forest ecosystem. 2. Maximizes the retention of old growth and large trees, as appropriate for the forest type. And 3. Focuses on prescribed fire as the primary means to achieve modified wildland fire behavior, as measured by the projected reduction of uncharacteristically severe wildfire effects for the forest type. $1 billion for vegetation management projects carried out solely on National Forest System land that the Secretary shall select following the receipt of proposals submitted in accordance with subsections A, B, and C of Section 4003 of the Omnibus Public Land Management Act of 2009, 16 U.S.C. 7303. 4. $500 million for vegetation management projects carried out in accordance with A. a water source management plan, or B. a watershed protection and restoration action plan. 5. $500 million for vegetation management projects that A. maintain or contribute toward the restoration of old growth characteristics, including structure, composition, function, and connectivity, according to the reference old growth conditions characteristic of the forest type, taking into account I. The contribution of the project to landscape fire adaptation and the ecological integrity of watershed and ecosystem health. And 2. The goal of retaining the large trees contributing to old growth structure. B. Focus primarily on small diameter trees and prescribed fire to modify fire behavior, as measured by the projected reduction of uncharacteristically severe wildfire effects for the forest type. And C. Maximize the retention of large trees, as appropriate for the forest type. 6. $450 million for the Legacy Roads and Trails program of the Forest Service. 7. $350 million for National Forest System land management planning and monitoring, with a focus on a. The assessment of watershed, ecological, and carbon conditions on National Forest System land. And B. The revision and amendment of older land management plans that present opportunities to protect, maintain, restore, and monitor ecological integrity, ecological conditions for at-risk species, and carbon storage. 8. $100 million for maintenance of trails on National Forest System land, with a focus on trails that provide to underserved communities access to National Forest System land. 9. $100 million for capital maintenance and improvements on National Forest System land, with a focus on maintenance level 3, 4, and 5 roads and improvements that restore ecological integrity and conditions for at-risk species. $100 million to provide for more efficient and more effective environmental reviews by the Chief of the Forest Service in satisfying the obligations of the Chief of the Forest Service under the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, 42 U.S.C. 4321 et seq. Through a. the hiring and training of additional personnel, b. the development of programmatic assessments or templates, c. the procurement of technical or scientific services, d. the development of data or technology systems, e. stakeholder and community engagement, and f. the purchase of new equipment. 11. $50 million to develop and carry out activities and tactics for the protection of older and mature forests on National Forest System land, including completing an inventory of older and mature forests within the National Forest System. $12. $50 million to develop and carry out activities and tactics for the maintenance and restoration of habitat conditions necessary for the protection and recovery of at-risk species on National Forest System land in implementing Forest Service hazardous fuels reduction and other vegetation management programs and projects based on a science-based analysis carried out by the Secretary. 13. $50 million to carry out post-fire recovery plans that a. emphasize the use of locally adapted native plant materials to restore the ecological integrity of disturbed areas, and b. do not include salvage logging. 14. $50 million to develop and carry out non-lethal activities and tactics to reduce human-wildlife conflicts on National Forest System land. And 15. $2,250 million to be used for staffing, salaries, and other workforce needs to support the development of a civilian climate corps for the purposes of managing National Forest System land, subject to the conditions that a. the amounts made available under this paragraph shall be in addition to any amounts required for salaries and expenses needed to carry out projects under this subsection, and b. members of the Civilian Climate Corps shall be compensated at not less than 200% of the annual federal poverty line. b. priority for funding. The Secretary shall prioritize for implementation under this section projects described in paragraphs 1 through 5 of subsection A1, for which an environmental assessment or an environmental impact statement required under the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, 42 U.S.C. 4321 et seq., has been completed. 2. That are collaboratively developed, or 3. that include opportunities to restore sustainable recreation infrastructure or access or accomplish other recreation outcomes, if the opportunities are compatible with the primary restoration purposes of the project. C. Limitations. None of the funds made available by this section may be used for any activity 1. conducted in a wilderness area or wilderness study area, 2. that includes the construction of a permanent road or permanent trail, 3. that includes the construction of a temporary road, except in the case of a temporary road that is decommissioned by the Secretary not later than 3 years after the earlier of a. the date on which the temporary road is no longer needed, and b. the date on which the project for which the temporary road was constructed is completed. 4. Inconsistent with the applicable land management plan. 5. Inconsistent with the prohibitions of the rule of the Forest Service entitled Special Areas, Roadless Area Conservation, 66 Federation Reg. 3244, January 12, 2001, as modified by Subparts C and D of Part 294 of Title 36, Code of Federal Regulations, or 6, carried out on any land that is not national